go ahead and write those down, and Mira will be able to answer those at the end of the presentation. If you would like to call in using a phone, you can locate the audio pane in your control panel, and you can dial in the information to access the code if you can't hear us here through the computer system. Like I said, you'll be able to ask questions through the question pane. At the very end, you'll be able to raise your hand if you have a question. I will be moderating the presentation, so again, if you have questions, go ahead and answer those at the end. I will now ask Dara to introduce herself and her staff, and we will start the presentation.
Charles, is it
Yes,
me or Dara?
Oh, Dara, Mira. I had Dara down
Okay.
as MVS, so this is Mira, everyone.
Hi, everyone. This is Mira Youssef with Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa, and I'm the only staff that that is able to do this presentation today. So I just want to thank all of you to be attending this webinar, because I know we're all busy, and sometimes attending another webinar or training is it's kind of a relief at the same time, but then at the same time we have so much to do, right? So okay, hold on. Where's my
I've given you access to take over the webinar, Mira.
okay, hold on. So I've lost it all of a sudden.
Yep, I can see your emails.
You can see my
Yeah.
emails. Okay, let me go and all
There
right.
you go.
So you see it?
Yep,
Okay.
we can see it.
You can see everything. Gotcha. All right. So again, Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa. I think it is important that we begin anything that we do just to remind ourselves that we have to about self-care. So just kind of like a reminder for us that caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And this is by Audre Lorde. Just kind of like to remind ourselves, right? Because our work is it's very taxing to all of us. So it's important that we just think about that first. In the chat box, I kind of would like to know if you could just share your name and what do you know about the Asian community in Iowa in one word. So if you can just chat in the, if you could just kind of like, I'm just kind of wondering if you have done this before. So there's a chat box um, in the screen, and if you could just kind of like type a message there, just sharing your name, who are you, and what do you know about the Asian community in Iowa in one word? I don't see any chat. I don't see any chat.
Mira, do we want to have people raise their hands if they have a response to this so they can speak? I don't know if
Oh,
the
they
chat
cannot
works.
chat?
Yeah, I don't know if the chat actually works.
Okay. That's okay then. I thought like to just make it more like interactive. I think this is important to usually when we do webinars, well, is we do chat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if we can't, it's okay. And then maybe, yeah, so can we just maybe like have a hands up, and then if they want to share?
Sure. If any of the people attending today's webinar would like to share, your name and kind of what they know about the Asian community in Iowa or what they've heard. So if you want to, go ahead and raise your hand, and we will give
I
you
guess
the.
everyone is shy.
Oh, we have. Here's Maddie. We have Maddie. Maddie, go ahead with your question, Maddie.
Oh, no, one word about the Asian community. What do you know about Asian community, Maddie? I can't hear them.
Hello, Maddie.
Are they? I think they're all muted.
Maddie is unmuted. Maddie, did
Okay.
you have a response for Mira? No, we'll go to Kaylee here. Let me mute Maddie again. Kaylee Bashaw, go ahead with your response. Kaylee?
No? Okay.
It's possible that some people don't have mics on their
Okay, that's okay. So I
computer.
think we'll kind of like so just think about like maybe so when we're kind of going through this, just think about what you know about the Asian community. Okay? Okay, next. How do I and then also think about like what do you know about the Asian communities in Des Moines, in Iowa, and then in also in general. So today, I just want to do a quick introduction about the Asian and Pacific Islander communities in Iowa and nationally, and then maybe just introduce, not maybe, but I will introduce about Monsoon and the work that we've been doing, and also like just share our strategies in working with our own community. Just because that we are from the Asian community, we are sometimes also very much like an outsider because we all have very different like immigration stories, if maybe we're the first generation, second or third. So us ourselves, we have to create our own strategies in working with our own communities. So Monsoon, so our full name is Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa. um, we are kind of like in the process of like really thinking about changing our name because of the word women, because it's not very inclusive according to the youth that we have worked in the past, because they are also questioning like, how come we're not part of the name, because can you also provide services for us then if the name of the organization is Women of Iowa. So therefore for us, I think we've been kind of thinking about really changing the name, just to make it more inclusive. But so we are a community-based organization, and our mission is really just to end violence against women in the Asian and Pacific Islander API communities in Iowa. We started as a program under the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault in 2003. I was an AmeriCorps member back in 2003, and I just basically had asked Beth Barnhill at that time saying, hey, I want to organize in the Asian community, and she said yes. So I think that is a very good example of white allyship, is the fact that she said, yes, please do, right? Um, Let me just turn that phone off so then you guys don't have to hear that. All right, so hopefully that was turned off. So 2003 to 2007, Monsoon was just a program. It was run by volunteers under Iowa CASA. I left for grad school, left back in 2004, but volunteers and the Iowa CASA basically continued it. Although they were not like providing a lot of services, they just having a presence and not ending it, I think works. It worked. And back in 2007, they applied for the CVAD CVAD funding, and they got it, and they became a 501c3. Again, Iowa CASA had assisted Monsoon in applying for that 501c3. And we officially opened our door on December 15th of 2007, and I was one of the I'm basically the one of the co-founder and also the first director, and I'm still the director until today. My plan was only 3 years in Iowa, then leave, but I'm still here because I love the work. And we are funded basically by DOJ, Office on Violence Against Women, the Iowa AG's CVAD, and the Iowa Department of Public is our website, and also we have a helpline that is not a emergency, but it's just really for maybe a survivor that needs help, and it's 24 hours. So we are basically volunteering, not volunteering, but one of the staff will basically is responsible in answering that helpline. And our main office is here in Des Moines, and then we also have an office in Iowa City that we opened back in 2009 when we received a direct OVW funding.
Hey, Mira, I do have a question. Wanting
Okay.
to go back to your name, United Asian Women of Iowa. How did the need for inclusivity? How did that come about? Was that through part of a strategic planning process, or did that come from the community where they said we need this to be about people and not necessarily just women?
So in 2009, we've been working with a lot of youth. Our violence prevention program is it's focusing on API youth. And a lot of the boys, API boys, will ask us directly, is like, how come we are not included in your name? So that just really started of us thinking like, let's sit down and really like think about we need to change our name. So I think since the very beginning we've been questioned,
Hmm.
but it just really it takes time because we have to change all of our marketing stuff. And I think we are kind of like in the process now with the board to discuss this, and hopefully like in 2 years we will need to change our name because it's not inclusive of everyone,
Right. Cool. Thank you.
by community members, not just by the youth, but everybody else, because they were just basically saying, hey, that kind of also like an indication that the community is, they feel comfortable of about us saying like, hey, can you just kind of like change this because we don't feel like we belong. So
Right.
I think that is the reason. But we're now in the process of really making, this happen.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. So before we kind of like talk more about our program, I just kind of would like to discuss about our core values, because I think it's really important that any organizations have like a set of core values that will basically inform everything that they do, not just programmatically, but also how we treat each other within the organization. What are your policies and protocols? How do we then engage the community? How do we engage, or how do we deal with um, other service providers, other community members? I mean, just really important. So Monsoon, our core values are basically on the right side top. Okay, so we are a feminist activist organization. We are community based. We believe in social justice. I think that is a very first thing that in the very, very beginning, how we um, organize or have started established Monsoons, like all of us that were like founders of Monsoons, like we really are into about social justice and social change. We are survivor centered, we're trauma informed. We also would like to have a public health approach and about transformative justice. So basically that is our foundation, that's our root. And for us, then from there, then we kind of have these different programs that we would like to like basically attain, right? So we have youth programming. We want to do API Mails program. We have the mobile. We wanted in the future maybe a mobile legal advocates. And then now we have an office in Des Moines and Iowa City, but we would love to have an office in Sioux City. We also want to have a community store, center, cafe someday, right? And then alliances with other movement, because for us, I think it is crucial that violence against women program, it's not just about us, and that it is important for us to be allied with labor rights movement, about immigration rights, because all of those issues are affecting the women, the men, the family, the children, the youth that we are working with. So therefore, we do not just work with in a one category, but it's really broad-based movement. We also had done basically transnational work and alliances, because since we are an immigrant refugee uh, organization, we believe that anything that happened, the reason why we're here is because like certain foreign policies have, certain foreign policies have basically affected our communities, and that's why we are in the United States. And there are still policies that are being implemented that's affecting our community back home or back to countries that we are from. So therefore, our work is not just like local, not just national, but it's also international. So these are the things that we wanted to do. So this is just the tree that I want to show as a way of like to see like what we're about, right?
So,
And then of course, yeah,
Mira,
go ahead.
if I'm looking at this correctly, it's really interesting. It's a great visual. So at the bottom of the tree, we have the mission, vision, and values kind of Monsoon, and then as we move up, these are things that Monsoon wants to branch out and provide services for by 2020. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's yeah, the core values is the root, and then we have the branch, and these are basically our allies, our collaborators, right? And then we have the fruits, the leaves, whatever. So this is like a good way of any organization can use of like visioning. What do you want your organization to have?
That's a great idea. I
So,
really like that visual.
so that is one thing that we do. So you kind of now understand what we're about and not, like, oh, what, Monsoon, what are they about? So this is what we're about. So moving on to our programs itself. So we provide direct services, and we have back in 2003, we immediately have implemented or replicated the San Francisco Asian Women's Shelter's multilingual advocate model, because in our community, we're not just bilingual, we're multilingual. So each staff doesn't just speak English and maybe Thai or English or Tagalog. They might be speaking like with me. I speak other, like I speak Tagalog, Kapampangan, a little bit of Malaysian and Indonesian, right? So it's like, and then plus English. So a lot of us are multilingual because, that's just like where we're from. It's like we have our different languages and then we have the national language. So we have the multilingual advocate program that's also mobile. So because for us, the Asian community in Des Moines or in Iowa is very dispersed. So therefore, we can't just be in Des Moines. We have to go where the survivors are. So if you are a survivor-centered organization, you cannot tell survivors to go to your office. You need to go where they are at. So that's what we've been doing, is going where they are at. We provide advocacy, basically everything that everyone provides. But the only thing with us is like maybe if we have one survivor that we're assisting today, it's not just a 1 hour, 2 hour work, but it's basically could be all day, because there are other issues that might be coming up, and therefore we have more hours for each person. In addition to that, we don't tell survivors like, oh, I can just help you. Let me just turn this off. Hold on. I'm just going to help you for 3 months and that's it. For us, it's like forever, basically. So a lot of survivors that we have been assisting since 2008, 9 are still like survivors that we are still assisting until today. So we never, and it's also part of like, for us, it's a culture thing where, we kind of had built relationship with them. Therefore, cutting it off is also like cutting off like a community member. So for us, we don't cut off anyone for services. Basically, they're with us forever. So a lot of them will come back, like back and forth, right? And then so we also provide support groups, referrals. We don't call it support group. We call it like circle, very, very like, people like, I don't need support. I don't understand what that is about. So we just kind of like named it something else. And then recently, we were gifted by ICADVA a house that we renovated, and now is our transitional housing project. So we have one house that basically will house one survivor and their family for like 3 to 6 months, or maybe even a year, because sometimes survivors that we're assisting, especially the ones who are waiting for their VAWA, sometimes it takes like a year or more. So therefore, for us, we have to be flexible in order to be, again, survivor-centered. And then we also have our violence prevention program. And our program is basically working with API youth, and we are in the schools. In addition to that, we have Summer School of Youth Activism that is an annual event, because what we've noticed is like, yeah, we work with the youth, but we never really give them the tool or the analysis in order to kind of like analyze it themselves and figure out, hey, what are the connections? Why do I have to like learn about not bullying or sexual harassment or maybe dating violence, but they don't really understand why. So therefore, for us, it is important that we engage them in a way that maybe things that they will not learn from the school, they will learn through this Summer School of Youth Activism. So with this program, we have collaborated with a LA-based, or it's a national organization, it's a feminist organization called Affirm. So Affirm we've been doing this is our 3rd year. So they come to Des Moines like in the summer, and then for 1 week or 4 days they will like have workshops for the youth, and can only have like 10 to 15 youth because we want it to be more like deeper knowledge and also like being more involved. In addition to that, we do community outreach, engagement, and organizing. So this is one part of it, right? We do presentations and meetings, and it's also part of community building. So we do a lot of those. It is very tiring, but we have to do it. In addition to that, we also provide technical assistance. We're funded by Office on Violence Against Women, so we are one of the TA of OVW for their grantees and also other organizations that would like to improve their services for SA survivors who are from the Asian communities. So through NAPISEV, we kind of provide that technical assistance. So this program is not based in Des Moines, but it's based in San Francisco because the director or the coordinator of this program is from the Bay Area. So she's based there. And then we are also now running the statewide chat line victim services through Iowa Arch. So this is not a culturally specific program, but it's for everyone. But it's rooted with the same kind of philosophy as Monsoon. Okay, questions?
Mira, I do have a question. You said Monsoon has one transitional home. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then does Monsoon own that home?
Yes, we do.
You
It was a free house, but given to Wells Fargo to ICADVA. Then ICADVA gave it to us. And it was a house that was it was a crack trap house. It was a mess. So last year we renovated it, and also so it's kind of connected with community building because we've never really worked with faith-based organization. So we have collaborated with the Des Moines First Unitarian Church, and then through them they built a fence for us. So they built a fence, they helped inside to renovate a little part of it. So that was also like really like a community building because they were really like, they enjoyed it. Now they're asking for another one. I'm like, no, we need to rest.
and I was just going to ask you if there were any more plans for another one.
Not right now.
No? Okay.
That was a lot of work. And I think that project had kind of like depleted our capital. So before we can move on to another housing project, I think we have to kind of replenish that funding.
Right.
And then we'll move on. So I think it's like slow down, you know?
I think it's a great idea. I think it's awesome that you guys have that.
Yeah, we love it too. We love it. It's a lot of work, but it's all good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to the strategy. So for us, there are three things that we usually have to do as advocates, as Monsoon's staff, employees. So first, we have to learn about the dynamics of gender-based violence, and then that is really crucial, like having knowledge, build up our own knowledge by going to trainings, webinars, workshops, books, right? What does that mean? So for us, we have to really like be expert on that. And then the second one is learning about the victim survivor histories for vulnerabilities and experience, because again, we have to be kind of curious. We have to be curious about the survivor that we are assisting. What is her story, right? And then through her own story, we will find out of like what is her strength, you know, what has happened. And through that, I think it's really, really important. Then we then create then a plan for her to leave that relationship or to figure out what she wants to do on her own. And then the third most important thing is like sometimes when we're doing this work, we always just think about the survivor and not really think about the communities that the survivor is from, because that is also a strength. So if we're really going to be a community-based organization, we should also think about like who else around who are basically part of the so-called, you know, like who can help her besides us, because we are not going to be there all the time. So therefore for us it is also important that we get to know the communities where she is from. So for us, these are the three things that usually a Monsoon staff will need to learn and be an expert. Okay. So now we're moving on to like, what do we mean by Asian and Pacific Islanders? So if you really look at the map of Asia, we will serve anyone from this map. So from maybe like the middle, what we call as Middle East, until like the Kiribati, which is like those small islands in the Pacific. So we provide services to everyone who is from this, from Asia. Okay, so it's really big and very diverse. And I think it is also important that we are not called Oriental, because that's not the term that we want to be called. And also that's very imperialist, colonialist term. So, and also sometimes you will see API, A, and then NPI, Asians, Asian dash. Sometimes there's no hyphen, Americans, APA, which is Asian Pacific Americans. So it's kind of like the same story as any other communities of color about how do we want to call ourselves. And I think it is important that self-identification is part of this, it's like a political act, because it is up to us how we want to be called. So it's the same as like Latino or Hispanic, African American or Black. So it's the same as Asian American, Asian API, how, it's kind of the same kind of process.
And Mira, I'm assuming there's even conflicting views about different how things are appropriate within the API community, correct?
Oh, definitely. There is a lot. So for us, we're just using Asian and Pacific Islander, or Asian, because the whole thing about Asian Pacific Islanders, sometimes Pacific Islander will say, we're not Asian. Mm-hmm. So you have to include the N. So it's really depending who you're talking to. But yeah, but these are, but just don't use Oriental. Right. So that's what I'm just saying. And then we're also very diverse. There's more than 50 distinct ethnic and national origin subgroups. But the feds basically are saying that any Asian Americans include persons having origins in the Far East, Southeast Asia, or the Indian subcontinent. And then Pacific Islanders includes the indigenous population of any islands that are U.S. territories. Okay? And then here's a list. So these regional groupings really came from during the Cold War. So the CIA was then created. So in order for them to to have an easier way, they categorized us, right? So you will have the Central Asians, you will have the East Asians, Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, Southeast Asians, South Asians, or West Asians, or now it's called MENA. MENA is Middle Eastern, Middle East, and Northern African. So these categories are basically then just a way to make it easier for the CIA. And then basically we have, if you go to like, there's, like universities, they will have, like I got an MA in Southeast Asian Studies, so they will have different studies. They will have, so when we think about East Asians, they are usually the ones that we will think of just Asians, because whenever people think about Asians, it automatically Chinese or Japanese, right? But never the ones who are like from Southeast Asia.
Mira, I'm glad that you brought up this PowerPoint piece here, because I'm not sure most people would assume, associate Asians with Afghanis or Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. Most people don't make that a connection.
That they're Asians.
Correct.
They look like, some of them look like East Asians. Mm-hmm. Right? And also just the historical part of it, like the Silk Road came from, like it went through Central Asia. The Mongols came down to Central Asia. So that is the relationship. So yes, so I think this is an excellent, like just a list. Also, just to kind of like, there are more ethnicities than there are countries. That is important to understand. So for example, Laos, when we think about Laos, we only think about Laotian, but in reality, they're not just Laotian. They're Tai Dam, they're Mien, they're Hmong, they might be, I think that's it. Tai Dam, Hmong, Mien, and then Lao. And then within the Lao, they also have different ethnicities or language. So when we're thinking about ethnicities, it's also ethno-linguistic, because ethnicity is really based on the language, the linguistic part of our grouping. So for the Philippines, like for example, so the Philippines are not just Filipino, but they could be within the Filipino category. You will have Kapampangan, you will have Visayans, you will have Ilocanos, you will have all these other groupings that is based on the language. So now we have Southeast Asians coming from Burma or Myanmar. So within that community, they're not just Burmese. They could be Chin, they could be Karen, they could be Shan, they could be Rohingyas, right? So these so there are just so many things to learn because each country or each country that you might think like, oh, they just have one type of people. No, there's so much ethnicities. There's so many ethnicities and also languages. So just kind of like really think about that. Also Hawaiians, like have we ever met anyone from Phnom Penh, right? Or Yapis, so Chukis. So I think that just like be curious about this stuff. Any questions on this? No?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on. So in Iowa today, there's not many of us. There's only 69,062 Asians and 2,953 Pacific Islanders. And this is based on the 2016 census done by Iowa Data Center or something like that. So right now, based on the 2014 census, there are more South Asians. When I say South Asians, they basically the Asian Indians. So it's 21.7%. Chinese, except Taiwanese, are 16.9, then the Vietnamese, Korean, Filipino, Burmese, Lao, Thai, and then the other. Usually in the past, the Vietnamese were more than the South Asians, but now it's like South Asians. And the reason for that is a lot of South Asians are coming in as like basically with workers visa. So they come and work in bigger companies here. So there's like, and there's more coming in, right? And then for the Chinese, sometimes they are coming in also as students, as international students. And for the Vietnamese and the Lao and Vietnamese and Lao, they were like the former refugees. Filipinos, there might be coming in either as wives of Americans that they have met, or maybe they came in back, you know, as like as workers as well. And same as the Koreans or even Thai. But the Asian communities basically is the population will increase in 2050. This is what they were saying, okay? And then the top 5 city residents in 2010 is Des Moines, of course, Ames, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, West Des Moines. And I just feel like West Des Moines and Des Moines should just be together, and it's usually Sioux City right here. And then the most frequently spoken languages are Vietnamese, Chinese, Lao, Korean, and Tagalog or Filipino. And then in 2010, we have seen an increased number of international students from Asia, and in particular China. So we had been doing more work in that community in our Iowa City office. So we have 2 international students from China who are working with us in our Iowa City office, who speaks Mandarin and Cantonese. And then there's also a lot of interstate migration of API for families and work. So what is going, for example, with the Karen community, is they might have been resettled in Ohio, but they might have like families here in Des Moines, and they said, oh, there's a job here. So then they start moving to Des Moines, maybe live in Perry. So that is basically a lot of those interstate migration, okay? I think it is important that when you're also doing advocacy work, that you have to understand is like, what is the story of migration of the community that is, you know, that you're working with or that you will work with, because I think that's really important. So Asians in the United States, we just did not migrate here just recently. We had been in this land since the 18th century because of the Filipinos, because again, because of a Spanish galleon, because Philippines was a colony of Spain. So therefore we have this relationship with Mexico. So they had the Spanish galleons, and Filipinos were basically became indentured servants in those trade ships, and they jumped ships, and now there are Filipino community in New Orleans who are basically descendants of these Filipinos who jumped ship. We also have stories of Chinese in 1849 who came because of the gold rush and also transcontinental railroad, and also maybe their factory workers. And same as the Japanese in Hawaii, they were the farm workers on plantations in 1885 to 1924. And then Angel Island is basically our point of entry, like the Ellis Island, right? So San Francisco, that's why there's a lot of Asians in California, because that was our point of entry for a lot of the Asians. So it's kind of like the Ellis Islands. And then, and also when we're looking at this anti-immigration sentiment, this is not something new. This has been going on since the 1800s, because we have the Chinese Exclusion Act, and then through that we also have the National Origins Act and the Tidings-McDuffie Act. So this anti-immigration sentiment is not new, but it seems like we don't learn from our history. So therefore for us, in order to kind of like not to repeat that, it's like we have to learn like stories from what had happened in the past. In addition to that, when we think about farm workers, we always think about just the Latinos, but in reality, the very first farm workers in California were Filipinos. The very first, like the ones who organized the Farm Workers Union were Filipinos, because we were the one that the Filipino men were the first one who migrated to United States, because we became a colony of the United States in 1898 to work in those farms. So therefore, then it's like that's, you know, it's kind of like it's important to understand that we are just not new in this country, but we've been around. Okay, questions? No? Okay, so sorry about this history, but it's important to know it. Okay, so specifically for Iowa, so how did we get here? So it's similar to like the national migration of Asians. There's different waves of different waves of migration to the United States. So in the 1960s, in Iowa specifically, there were a lot of like Asians coming in as students. They were doctors and nurses. They might be wives of American military men. You have to understand about the Korean War. Also then the Vietnam War, right? So therefore, like, then there will be like Asians are coming in then in 1960s. And then in the 1970s to the 1980s, there's a huge resettlement of Vietnamese refugees after the fall of Saigon in 1975. But this resettlement also included refugees from Cambodia and Laos. I think it is important to kind of like be proud of that. Iowa was the very first state that have resettled refugees after the Vietnam War. So Governor Ray was the one who brought in, I think, the Thai Dam community first. I've never met any Thai Dam until I moved back to Iowa, because the huge population of Thai Dam are in Iowa. So Governor Ray was the one who opened Iowa for the resettlement of Vietnamese, Khmer or Cambodians, and Lao people. That includes like Thai Dam, Myanmar, right? So that was the 70s and the 80s. And now in 2000, we've also had an increased number of HB1 visa holders from South Asia. Also Asian women arriving as fiancés of American men. And I think a lot of us had worked with Asian women who are, this is their story. It's like they're coming in as wives. Also now it's like international students from China, and sometimes South Korea and Taiwan were coming, and India as well. In the past, I think the majority of international students are mostly like grad students, and the grad students will have their families with them. But this time, I think there is a shift where, especially the Chinese international students, where it's not grad students, but it are the undergrads. So it's a different kind of like population, because they are still teenagers. So you will have someone who may be like 16 to 21 who are coming in and as international students. And then now the recent resettlement of refugees coming from Burma or Myanmar, Bhutan, Nepal, and Iraq, and I think now also Syrian. So there is like new population that are coming in. So for us as advocates, we have to know who is coming into our communities, because we cannot just ignore that people move and people will come to our communities even though they might be in the rural areas. It is important to be curious of who is there and how we can like provide those services. Okay, so I guess we don't have a chat box. So just something to think about is like, like what will be your challenge in working with an individual who is from the API community? And then also think about like this, you know, let's just talk, let's not just think about the challenges, but also like what have you done in the past that you might have worked with an Asian woman and it totally worked. So just thinking about those strategies, I think it's important that it's not just about our so-called challenge or weaknesses, but also our strength. And then how can we use those strengths in order then to provide effective services? Also, I would like you to all to think about the challenge, a challenge not just because of language, just because they don't speak English, but beyond that. And that include like your own biases and maybe, you know, just I think that's important to think about. It's like, what are your biases? You know, and what are the stereotypes that you will have about the Asian community? Just really think about that. Because sometimes for us, we have to really work within before we can really like work externally. Okay? So, so it is important that when we're working with communities of color or marginalized community, that we have to think about them, or anyone that you're working with, that an individual is part of a community, and that we are not, our characteristic is not just in one box, right? I hate those presentations where they will make a list of different characteristics of each community, because it really excludes certain individual from that community. So I would avoid that. So for us, it is important that we have to understand that each individual is really, they're so unique. They will have their own, you know, they are so diverse. They don't have to be like, they are not all straight. They might not be like all old. They might be third generation who's been here for a while, instead of like thinking that they just migrated here to the US, and they might not speak English, but they've been here for a while. So therefore, if you ask someone like, do you speak English? And they will say, of course I do. I was born here. So therefore, I think it's really important that we understand that an Asian person is not just part of this characteristic category, that they're also very, diverse, that they are unique. So so I think then that is like an important way of working with an individual, like a survivor from a marginalized or communities of color. And also, you know, like becoming, I think as an advocate, we also need to be aware of our own knowledge, experience, and all perception. I think just being honest about like, okay, I don't really know nothing about that community. Maybe I should learn more about that. I just don't like Asian food. You know, I have this perception that they're all like this. So therefore, I think it is important, just being honest about that is crucial. So then you could kind of like catch yourself if you're kind of, if you are working with an Asian woman and you feel that way, but then she's really not, she just totally dismantled your own perception of what an Asian woman should be like. So therefore, I think it is important just to be honest with that. Therefore, our approaches will vary, right? It will be, again, if we're survivor-centered, it should be based on that one survivor and not based on what we think this community should be, based on our own so-called knowledge, experience, or our own perception. Okay? This is kind of important because this, our own individual perception, basically influences how we provide those services. So if we are, so even the community member, even the survivor that you're working with, the reason that sometimes they don't seek services is because they had really bad experiences with with social services. So therefore, they will not seek any services. So they themselves are basically then influenced if they are going to seek services or not. But also, it is important that at the same time, like individual service providers, perception knowledge and or lack of knowledge and experiences about the API communities, that basically will influence how you will provide those services. So that's why for us, it is really important that we are, you know, like curious, like, you know, like where are they from? But in a way where it's you're not giving them the burden of learning about them. It's not like asking them, but you yourself should kind of like research on your own instead of us teaching you. So I think that is really important, like being curious, but then at the same time, taking the responsibility of learning on your own and not asking someone from the community to teach you. Instead, I think it's better, like, let me read something about that. The Karen community, where are they from, right? I mean, what's their story? How come they're like in conflict with the Burmese government? So I think that's just really one of the curiosity in this kind of work is really important. And then also it is important that we get to know the community we serve, because usually those solutions are in that community, and you will find an ally if you know someone from the community, because they will help you in providing those services. For us, that has been our strategy, is really getting to know the community that we provide services to, because we can't do everything. So therefore, sometimes like other community members will step up because they've had this relationship with us. So that is really important when you're working with the Asian community, because they would love to help you. But then also like telling, kind of like, I know we have this issue of confidentiality and boundaries. I think that's also an important conversation to have with them about confidentiality, right? So if you're going to have a volunteer from the community, it's really like training them as well about what does confidentiality means. So about safety. So I think having that conversation with volunteers who are from the community that will work with your organization is also crucial, because we talk a lot in our community, especially if it's a small community. And then get to know, it's kind of connected with this, get to know individuals and families from the communities. That is really, really important. So if we're going to say, I think just build that relationship. It's, going to their parties, eating food with them. I think sharing, breaking bread, I think that is so important with the Asian community. So it's almost like you become a family member. We usually would adopt, right? We adopt like community members because we've had that relationship. And sometimes that has been our own issue sometimes because of this boundary issue, this boundary so-called, as advocates, it's always saying like, oh, about boundaries. But sometimes in the Asian community, we have to kind of like deconstruct that, or kind of like really look at it in a different way. It's like, how could we create boundaries within our own services, but it's more like culturally relevant, culturally specific, because it's like we have a very different definition and different way in practicing it. And then most important thing is, don't let language or cultural differences be hindrance. As a matter of fact, that should be more a curiosity. Like you should be more curious. It's like what they are about, like be curious in a way where it's also respectful. Okay? Questions on this? No? Okay. I think, yeah.
Okay.
Any question?
We'll go ahead, Mira. Thank you for the presentation. We're going to go ahead and open up the Q&A portion of the webinar. As a reminder, you can submit your questions via your control panel. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question. In order to ask the question, you have to have a mic connected to your computer, or you need to be using the phone call option in the control panel. So are there any questions from those in attendance? If so, go ahead and raise your hand. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and raise your hand in the control panel.
No questions? Wow, okay.
No question. Mira, do you have contact information available for anybody that may have questions after the webinar is done? Oh, we have a question.
Okay.
Kaylee, we have a question from Kaylee Bashaw. Kaylee, go ahead with your question. Kaylee, go ahead with your question. Do you have a mic connected to your computer? Okay, looks like we're having some issues with Kaylee. Kaylee, Mira's going to go ahead and give out her contact information here, and I'm sure she'd love to have a conversation with you after the webinar.
Yes, please contact us if you have any questions, and we can definitely do a training in your organization, provide you, like, you can call us, you can call Lata de Melo if you have any direct services questions. Okay, let me just, also, I think, let me just kind of like, I will like this, okay, hold on. So this is our contact information. So you can email us or call us, ask for me or ask for Lata, L-A-T-A, if it's specifically on direct services, okay? So that's our information. And I think it's in the, I think you all have the PowerPoint copies. I see it right there in the handout. But then also, if you are interested in supporting our work, we are having a summer sidewalk sale this Saturday, and we're gonna be also having a pop-up kind of cafe selling Vietnamese coffee, iced Vietnamese coffee, Thai iced coffee and tea, like Filipino kind of like iced drink and chai. So please come by and, just to check us out. And then these are just information. Pokwat is specifically for people of color, queer, allies, and transgendered, for our youth. So if you're interested, if you know someone who might be interested in that, they're having a meeting. And then we're also having a youth violence prevention focus group discussion, because we want to enhance our violence prevention program. So in order to do that, we have to ask the youth of what, like, what can we do to make it better. So these are just our future so-called activities. And again, yeah, this is our information. Contact us.
As far as if you want to go back to the sidewalk sale, I would encourage anybody who is in the Des Moines metro area to attend this event this weekend. Me and my husband will be coming to the sidewalk sale on Saturday. So if you're in the area, please come to the Franklin Avenue area and get a drink and
hang out with us.
Stuff. Yeah, hang out with Monsoon.
Yeah,
Mira, will you be there, Mira, this weekend?
I have to. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. I think we're good. Thank you, Mira, and thank you for everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, Mira's contact information was just given. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a short survey on the presentation, and we'd appreciate it if you'd complete and provide the feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email within the next 24 to 48 hours with a link to view the recording of today's webinar, or today's webinar will be available on ICADVA's web YouTube page. I'd again like to thank Mira Youssef from Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa. This ends today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.